Hello again. My name is Dr. Christopher Stratman, and this is part three in our discussion of the ethics of artificial intelligence. Today's lecture is on the risks of artificial general intelligence. So let's get right into things. The place where I want to begin is by thinking about how some sort of super intelligent, godlike being, an artificial general intelligent creature, would view us. How would they consider human beings? What would be their perspective on our way of living? Another way of asking this question is, would some sort of artificial general intelligent creature or being or robot think of us the same way that we think of spiders or ants or other kinds of insects? That is, would they have any worries about killing them, having some sort of insect repellent or some sort of spray that you could wipe out all of the spiders in somebody's house? Right? Would they do that to us? Would they have some sort of human being repellent, some sort of spray that they could just annihilate all of the human beings just simply because that they find us annoying, like a pest? Is that how they would view us? But we don't necessarily need to go to that kind of extreme when we're thinking about the nature of this question. Some sort of artificial intelligent robot or creature that we create in the future, some AGI, doesn't necessarily have to have any sort of ill will towards us, in the same way that I don't necessarily have an ill will towards ants or slugs. Nonetheless, I still find them to be annoying. Some sort of super intelligent AGI might not destroy humanity on purpose, but as some sort of a side effect because they're doing something else or they have some other sort of goal, and we just happen to get in the way. Consider, for example, the following kind of hypothetical possible world. I'm going to call this the paperclip world. Let's suppose that the superintelligent AGI has the goal of studying paperclips. They want to figure out exactly what the nature of a paperclip is. Why are paperclips so important? And so they go to the task of trying to understand every single minute detail you possibly could as it relates to paperclips. Yet, in the process, it could be possible that this super intelligent AGI happens to deplete all of the resources that, as human beings, we rely on in the process of trying to understand the nature of paperclips. So they use up all of the water, they destroy the environment, they destroy all of the food that we have and all the other sorts of natural resources, all in an attempt to understand paperclips. And so human beings end up living a terrible life. Maybe we die off, all because the super intelligent AGI is attempting to understand the nature of paperclips. Of course, you still might think that that's a really outlandish hypothetical world, and we don't need to be concerned with that sort of situation. So maybe we can consider a different kind of hypothetical possible world. Let's call this the severed head world. Let's suppose that we give this super intelligent AGI the task of solving brain cancer. And so it goes through all of the different scenarios, it researches everything that it can to figure out the best way to cure brain cancer. And it turns out that this intelligent, super intelligent AGI thinks to itself, well, if we just sever humans' heads from their bodies, then we'll solve brain cancer. And so the super intelligent AGI decides to cut everybody's heads off. Well, it does solve brain cancer by cutting everybody's heads off, but at the same point, then everybody would be dead, and that doesn't help anyone. We could probably come up with a long laundry list of all sorts of different scenarios where some sort of super intelligent AGI ends up harming or destroying humanity as a kind of side effect that is involved in a process in which it's trying to achieve some sort of goal. If the AGI is goal oriented, it might have no other wish or desire but to achieve that goal and in the process harm human beings. Indeed, you might think, well, what we should do is start to be very, very nice to our current technology. You should treat your phone as kindly as possible. You should be as nice to your laptops as you possibly can be, your smart TVs, your cars, whatever. Why? Well, because one day, maybe in the future, when the super intelligent AGI it becomes aware of what's going on, they'll recognize that you were nice to all the other technological devices a long time ago, and then maybe it'll be nice to you. Of course, I'm speaking in a bit of a ridiculous way, but I'm trying to make clear this central question of the fact that we just have no idea how some super intelligent AGI will treat us, how it would view us, given that it has a mind like you and I have a mind. Given that it has various goals and desires and beliefs, maybe it has emotions, maybe it's a godlike creature that we've created. Now, there's different sorts of approaches that we could take towards this particular question, this dilemma that I'm trying to articulate. One would be what we might call the optimist approach. That approach would suggest that we should not be afraid of this future technology, this godlike creature that we've created, because it's there to help us. It's there to make the world a better place. The other approach would be a kind of a pessimistic view, a skeptical view, and that would suggest that this godlike creature very well may destroy us, or at least we don't understand it. We don't know what it's doing, or we don't have any clue of what exactly it is we've created, and so therefore we should fear it. So let's take a look at these different extremes, these different ways of approaching this question about how some future godlike creature, some super intelligent AGI that has a mind superior to ours, how it would treat us, how it would view us. First, let's begin with the optimist. The optimist might say, well, look, there are certainly different risks that we have to consider because all advancements in technology have various risks. The internet certainly has risks. It's a tool. It can be used for good or for evil. Cars have risk. That's the reason why we put into place, rules of the road. Airlines have risks. Jets have risks. All sorts of different technologies have risks, but they also have a lot of really great rewards. This is true for all different sorts of technological advancements, and we shouldn't let the potential risks that definitely do exist prevent us from making these sorts of improvements because the improvements are really really beneficial for human beings. Indeed, in the case of some super intelligent AGI, it looks like the potential benefits and rewards for humans are just far beyond anything that we can imagine. So yes, we need to be careful. Nonetheless, the risks are justified because it would greatly enhance the society that we live in. It could cure cancer. It could do all sorts of different wonderful, amazing things. Indeed, I think this is the sort of approach that you hear quite often in the public forum and the marketplace of ideas nowadays. This is a part of the AI hype that I discussed in the previous lecture. You hear people all over the place talking about the different ways in which AI are going to revolutionize things like medicine and therapy and education and business. And the world 10 years from now is just going to be so radically different from anything that we can understand. And it's not clear that that's necessarily true. Nonetheless, for those who think that that's right around the corner, we need to take that seriously. So yes, these risks are real, but nonetheless, the benefits are so amazing that we must proceed with the development of this technology. Take, for example, something I recently heard Sam Altman say. Altman said, well, the future of artificial general intelligence is going to end up destroying humanity. But in the process, you're going to have a lot of really great advancements, and businesses are going to make a lot of money. And another thing that the optimist might say in defense of this position is look, somebody's going to develop this technology. If we don't develop this kind of super intelligent AGI, then maybe the Russians will, or maybe North Korea will. Somebody's going to develop this, so it better be us. We don't want some less competent or some sort of totalitarian government developing this technology that could destroy humanity. So we should be the ones that do it first. And of course, this will give rise to a new kind of arms race, very similar to what we saw with the development of nuclear technology, nuclear weapons. And I think that that's a really great example, the example of nuclear weapons. The optimist might say, look, the threat of AGI is exactly like that of nuclear weapons. Both of them have the power to destroy humanity. But we can use this as a kind of a guide. Human beings oftentimes project our own fears, our anxieties onto the technology that's being developed, right? That's certainly something that we do with nuclear weapons and nuclear technology. We're afraid of this, and so we project these fears onto that technology. Whether this is right or not, whether it's justified or not, is a different story. Or other sorts of technologies, right? Human beings were once very afraid of elevators. They were afraid to get onto an elevator because it was a technology that nobody understood, or at least nobody had experienced yet. And so they didn't want to get on because, human beings are projecting themselves onto this technology. But the technology doesn't have any sort of feelings. It's not out to destroy human beings, even though it could destroy us. Nuclear weapons don't have a goal to annihilate anyone. Elevators don't have a goal to kill anyone. So, arguably, some kind of super intelligent AGI also would not have some goal or desire to destroy human beings, even though it possibly could do that. The main thing, according to the optimist, is that we need to be able to control these weapons. We need to be able to control an elevator. We need to be able to control cars. And this involves regulations. So, that does seem like a fairly plausible way to respond that the optimist, might say, in the same way that we can control things like nuclear weapons and elevators, the internet, automobiles, aircraft, we can control all these different things. So it seems to follow that we should also be able to control AGI. Of course, somebody might point out, the astute person might recognize that AGI is different because artificial general intelligence would have a mind like you or me, maybe even a more advanced mind than you or me. So, in that sense, there does seem to be an important difference that we should pay attention to. And that raises the perspective of the pessimist. So let's consider what the pessimist might say about all of this. So, one thing that the pessimist would probably say is that it is correct to compare AGI to nuclear energy or nuclear weapons because, both of these things can destroy all of humanity. It can wipe out all of humanity. But there's a very important difference. We have a pretty good understanding of nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, but we do not understand artificial general intelligence. And that's because we don't understand how it would have a mind like ours. We're not even really sure what exactly it is that we're trying to create. So, when the optimist claims that all we really need to do is control the AGI, then that seems to be misleading or at least unwarranted. The claim that we can be careful in the development, just put into place the right regulations and control this technology seems to be rather implausible. Indeed, the pessimist would probably say that we need to really rethink the kind of cost benefit analysis that was offered by the optimists. The alleged benefits and rewards might create more problems for humanity that rather than creating some amazing new society that we can hardly imagine. Take, for example, the sorts of socioeconomic disparities and injustice and inequalities that already exist. If we were to create some sort of AGI, most likely that is not going to decrease these disparities or injustices. Most likely, this new kind of technology will probably widen the disparities, enhance the injustice and inequalities. And that's because we can simply ask who is it that's going to be able to afford this kind of new technology? It's not going to be the poor person working McDonald's, and it's most likely going to be the rich person. And in the same way, the development of AGI might widen the socioeconomic disparities that already exist. It might also further deepen the kinds of racial divides that already exist. And this goes hand in hand with the injustices and the inequalities that we can already identify in our society. Indeed, it could lead to the loss of jobs, loss of workers of all sorts. And of course, that's going to help keep the uber rich rich. It's going to enhance the richness, if you will. And I think it's fairly easy to see how this might happen, given the fact that the people that are already currently putting money and finance into the development of this technology turns out to be just a handful of a couple of investors, a small number of very large businesses that are really trying to just eat up all of the market share so that nobody can compete with them. Indeed, this is what tends to happen in a capitalist society like our own. Indeed, if they're the ones that are creating and writing the regulations, then this is a form of self regulation, which also suggests that you would further widen the disparities and injustices that already exist. So when we're considering these sorts of moral problems that the pessimist might raise, we might also want to suggest that we would need to ensure that the AGI's values are in some sense in alignment with our own values. The way that we should think about that is like this. If we think that we it's important to fight injustice and inequalities, if we think that it's important to fight against racial divides in our own society, then we would need to make sure that the development of this kind of technology, super intelligent AGIs, that their values are in line with our own values, that they would also want to fight against racial divides and injustice and inequalities. And it's just not clear how would we would go about doing that. This is known as the alignment problem. So let's think about what that problem says in a little more detail. The pessimist would argue that it's just not clear how we would make sure that the values of some super intelligent AGI are in line with our own values. We don't have a good track record of aligning our own values with other human beings. Take, for example, the fact that we can't even agree about things like abortion or euthanasia or whether or not we should have a particular tax bracket. There's all sorts of different ways in which our own values are not aligned with other human beings. We can't even agree amongst ourselves. And so our track record is pretty atrocious in that regard. Simply put, if we can't agree which values are the correct values, then how would we ever agree which values AGI should be aligned with? And things get even worse. We don't even have a good idea how we would ever get those values internalized in AGI in the first place. So, even if we hypothetically could agree that these values are the correct values, it's just unclear what we would need to do to ever get AGI aligned with that in the first place. How would we go about internalizing those values? Of course, the optimist might have a response to this kind of problem. The optimist might say, well, look, this is just simply an engineering problem. It's not a problem that's in principle impossible to solve. We just need to do more work. We need to put the engineers to work and figure it out. So let's think about that kind of response in more detail. The optimist might simply say that this is a problem that we should take seriously, but we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In fact, the optimist might say that as long as we can control AGI, as long as we have the right regulations in place, that's all we really need to do. In fact, they might say we don't even need to solve the alignment problem in the first place. This is not a problem that's so significant that engineers couldn't, figure out what's the best way to address these worries. And while the engineers are working on that issue, all we need to do is have the politicians and the lawyers and whoever else would be responsible put into place the right kinds of precautions or government regulations. Still, you might wonder, you might worry, well, is that really plausible? Again, this looks like it would be a situation where the business owners, the people that own this technology, would be regulating themselves. And of course, I think that it's important to recognize here that a technology like OpenAI is not really open. It's the technology, the secrets are not being given away to just anyone. And so the pessimist might respond simply by saying, well, who is it that's going to create the right government regulations? If it's the business owners, the people that own this technology, then it's plausible to think that they're not going to really do what protects you and me, what protects human beings in general. Rather, they're going to do whatever protects their business, right? They're going to protect their shareholders. They're going to keep their secrets secret. They're not going to let the government regulate their technology. And so then the pessimist might raise the following kind of worry. They might say, well, we can't be reactionary. We can't have some sort of reactionary response to this kind of a threat because this sort of threat or this kind of risk is far beyond anything that we can imagine. It might be plausible in the past, right? In the past, it was reasonable that governments could react to a threat when it's made present. And then the government could intervene and put into place laws or regulations as a way of responding or reacting to some situation. But that's not what we can do, according to the pessimists, with regard to AGI, because the risks and the threats are so far beyond anything that we can imagine. Take, for example, automobiles and highways, air travel. These involve lots of different risks and lots of different threats. And when there is some kind of a risk that's made present, then the government could intervene. They could create a new law or new regulation on what the speed limit for an automobile should be, or what are the kinds of regulations that would be involved with air travel. This is a way of reacting and responding to the threat when it becomes present. Similar sorts of things might be offered for things like the internet or social media. Some people have recently argued that uh, children should not be spending so much time on social media because it's dangerous or it presents a certain kind of a threat. And so the government might try to intervene and present or offer some new regulation on how much time a child is allowed to spend on social media, or which social media sites they are allowed to go to without parental supervision. These again are kinds of reactions and responses to a threat that is already made present, a way of intervening. But the reason why that's not going to work, according to the pessimists, for the development of AGI is because that kind of technology is too dangerous. Once the threat is made present, it will already be too late to do anything about it. It would be far too late to react and then respond. So then, how might the optimist respond to the pessimist's worry here? Well, the optimist would probably say, yes, it would be best to take some kind of preemptive measure to prevent the alleged harms that we're worried about. That does seem to be better than simply waiting for some disaster to happen, especially with AGI. Because if some disaster happens, then, it could be the case that all human beings are already destroyed, and then it's simply too late to do anything about it, right? That would be the best way to go, according to the optimists. However, it's not clear that we can do that because we don't yet know what would happen. We don't know for sure whether or not some super intelligent AGI actually would destroy all of humanity. We don't know exactly what the risks and the threats are. We can speculate, but we don't really have a good understanding of what these risks are. But that response is a little problematic. It seems inconsistent with the view that we considered previously, right? The optimists had a view that said that we can control AGI. But how is it that we could possibly control the AGI if we don't understand the AGI, right? If we don't even understand what it is that we're creating, then we wouldn't know what the risks and the threats are per se. We also wouldn't know how to control the AGI in order to avoid the risks and the threats. Right. So the optimist response here seems to also agree with the pessimist view that the benefits and the rewards for humanity are not well understood. Or another way of putting that is simply that we don't know what it is that we're creating. So then maybe the optimist has a different kind of response to the alignment problem. Maybe the right way of responding is not that we need to control the technology that we're developing, but maybe what the optimist will say is that we need to contain this kind of technology, right? We, as long as we can contain some super intelligent, artificial, intelligent creature, some godlike creature, if we can contain it, that's all that's needed. Consider how we contained something like the Chernobyl disaster, right? That was a case of nuclear energy that resulted in a lot of people dying and a terrible disaster. But we were ultimately able to contain it. Yet it's not clear how we would be able to contain some super intelligent AGI, some godlike creature that we're developing. And this is called the containment problem. So then, if the goal is to contain AGI, then how would we go about doing that? Well, one very straightforward way would be to simply turn it off, to shut it down, or to push pause on any further development. As soon as we see that there's some problem, as soon as we have some kind of inclination that things are going poorly, then we just turn it off. Indeed, this is something that a lot of different countries in Europe have already done. Many EU members have already created this sort of AI pause. Many of these countries are creating legislation that prevents any further development. Right? They've signed an open letter calling for a pause to any further development. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this kind of legislation that's being pushed right now in Europe, there's a link here you can take a look at. Well, of course, the pessimist will have a response to this way of containing the problem. The pessimist is going to argue that we can't just simply turn AGI off. We can't just simply shut it down. That's not the way the technology works. Artificial general intelligence is not like a TV. You can't just unplug it from the wall. It's not a computer, right? It's not the sort of thing that turns off. Once you've released artificial general intelligence to the wild, you have another mind out there. And this isn't the sort of thing that you can just unplug. Of course, even if you could unplug it, we would have another kind of worry, whether or not it's morally permissible to unplug it, right? Would this be the same thing as murder or killing someone? But clearly, our current technology is not the same thing as some sort of super intelligent, godlike creature. So maybe that's what we should focus on. What about our current technology? The optimists would point out that our discussion of AGI is overly focused on some godlike being, and that might be a problem. And it's just not clear that our current technology is like this. It's not clear that what's going on right now, the development of our current technology really presents the kinds of existential threats that we've been considering. At least it's not immediately obvious on its face. But what the optimist seems to be suggesting here is that technology is, in some important sense, morally neutral, right? When we claim that it's not clear that we've got the same kind of existential threats that we had in our discussion of artificial general intelligence, that's another way of just simply saying we can develop this new technology without having any real moral implications. And well, that's something the pessimist might want to reject. It's something they may push back against. So let's consider that in more detail. Clearly, the development of artificial intelligence is a useful tool, but that's not a reason to think that it's morally neutral. In fact, you might think that there is no such thing as a morally neutral tool or morally neutral kind of technology. A hammer can be used to build a house. A hammer can also be used to smash somebody's skull. A car can be used to get you to your job. And if you're driving drunk, it could also kill someone. So the pessimist might simply reject this idea that technology in general is morally neutral. So let's develop that in a little more detail too. What the pessimist might say is that our technology is going to radically change the world. They might say that the development of this technology is just beyond anything that we can really understand, that it's going to cause major disruptions in the way that the world works, the way that you live your life, and that this necessarily presents a potential harm both to you and to everyone else. But why is that the case? Well, one of the key things that's involved with the development of artificial intelligence is the giving way of control. The way in which this technology works is we would need to offer up a huge amount of information about yourself, about the way you live your life in order for these large language models to really help you. And when you give over control to your life, to something that we don't really understand, that might be morally problematic, especially when you think that these LLMs are owned by businesses that have more of a concern of making sure that they're protecting their shareholders than they are in protecting you. So, another way of thinking about what the pessimist is trying to argue at this point is that we should be very skeptical of anyone who has that much control over our lives and our children's lives, and also claim to be morally neutral. It's like the king who says, "Oh, I'm not taking any kind of moral stance." Nonetheless, they have the ability to completely control your life. But maybe you disagree. Maybe you think, well, that's not really going to happen, and so we need to develop this in more detail. What the pessimist is going to argue is that every single new technology involves the following kinds of affordances. Well, on the one hand, it gives us new things that we can do, things that we've never done before. It helps advance our lives, it makes our lives better in a lots of different ways, but it also takes away various things that we do. It takes away things that we used to be able to do. One really clear example of this is my 15-year-old daughter, who was born in 2009, really doesn't quite understand what a rotary phone is, right? She doesn't need to because she has a smartphone. In fact, she doesn't even really think of her cell phone as a phone. It's a pocket computer essentially. And so when you have a new kind of a technology that's introduced, you're given new way of doing things, and this might really help you in a lot of ways. It might make your life better, but it also takes away different ways of doing things that you used to do. Indeed, there's lots and lots of different examples, a whole laundry list of examples that we can consider. The example of a cell phone and a record player are just a kind of a couple very obvious examples. And so it seems plausible that we should think seriously about how artificial intelligence might change our own lives. What will our lives look like? What will society look like in the future when so many different things will be controlled by, replaced by large language learning models? So we need to take seriously and really think about in what way is this technology going to change society and change our lives? What parts of our lives are going to be disrupted or become obsolete? Well, one might think that it's going to change basically every part of one's life, every part of society where there already exists some sort of a bottleneck. Indeed, it's going to be very different than anything that we've seen previously. It's not merely ranking of content that's going to occur. Prior to 2017, that's basically how these algorithms worked. It just ranked content for us. But now that we have this new kind of technology moving towards what's sometimes called generative AI, we've got our algorithms that are creating content. And that seems to be a way in which many things in our current society are going to change in the future. And so it's a discussion of this kind of generative artificial intelligence that will be the focus for the next video lecture.